Hi, my name is Jenna Jones, and the change agent that I chose to do my presentation on was Nannie Burroughs. Nannie Burroughs was an educator. She ended up opening her own school in 1909, and then she ended up also teaching at her own school, and basically dedicated her whole life to teaching, not just teaching academics, but also teaching many life skills and teaching African American women how to work so that they could get better jobs in the future. She also was a civil rights activist. She did not believe that there were restrictions or that there should be restrictions for race and gender. So if someone wasn't getting a job because of their race or wasn't getting a job because of their gender, she really fought against that. She started the National League of Republican Colored Women. She was a part of the National Association of Colored Women and also a part of the National Association of Wage Earners and part of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. She was also a feminist. She believed suffrage for African American women was crucial to protect their rights, and therefore she spent years teaching women how to work. She also wrote about how black and white women need to come together to achieve suffrage, and one other way she was a feminist is she furthered opportunities for women beyond housework so that she taught them how to work so that they weren't doing chores and cooking and taking care of children all the time so that they could also go out and support their families. She was also a religious leader. She founded a club to offer night vocational classes for older women. She founded the National Baptist Convention Women's Auxiliary Group, and that group ended up becoming one of the most influential African American groups in the U.S. In 1907, it had about 1.5 million members. So, a little bit about Nannie Burroughs' life. She was born in May of 1880. Her grandfather was a slave, and he bought his way out of slavery. And her mother was also a slave, and she escaped slavery. Her father was a Baptist preacher and a farmer, and she was the oldest of 3 siblings. Her younger sister passed when she was very, very young, and then a few years later, her father also passed. And her mom, after her father passed, they relocated to Washington, D.C. because there were better job and education opportunities. And Nannie Burroughs excelled in school and basically anything that had to do with education. Some more, when she got to Washington, D.C., she went to Washington, D.C.'s M Street Colored High School, and she graduated with honors in 1869. After she graduated, she tried to get a teaching job, but she was denied mainly because of racial discrimination. So she ended up working at the National Baptist Convention, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Then she ended up opening her own school, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then she passed away in 1961 at the age of 82. She never got married because she was so dedicated to teaching women all about working and just teaching women all about education. So the National Baptist Convention, like I said, she got turned down from a teaching job right out of high school. And so she went to work at the National Baptist Convention as a bookkeeper and secretary. And then as she was working at the National Baptist Convention, she founded the Women's Auxiliary. And for that group, she was president until she had passed away. For the National Baptist Convention, she gave many speeches, and a lot of them talked about injustices women faced in the church, especially African American women in a Baptist church. After she got done working as a bookkeeper and secretary, she decided to open her own vocational school in 1909. This was the first high school and junior college that was a vocational school for African American women. In the beginning, she got 6 acres of land and then just needed funding. and Booker T. Washington told her that there was no way she was going to get funding for a whole school. But Nannie, being very persistent, she got funding, and not only did she get funding, she only got funding from African American people. And the only people that ended up working at her school were African American people. So all the teachers, all the people in the office were African Americans. At first, the school started in a very, very small farmhouse, and then a few years later, she moved the school into Trades Hall. That had 12 classrooms and 3 offices, so as you can tell, it grew significantly. And at the vocational school, they obviously taught academic studies, but they also wanted to teach about Black history, and they also wanted to teach religious studies, and she offered instruction to prepare Black women for work. These are pictures of the school. This was Trades Hall, and then members of the school. Nannie Burroughs' legacy, mainly the things that she is known for, or not so well known for, is Trades Hall, which is now a National Historic Landmark, which was the school that had 12 classrooms and 3 offices, and I think it's pretty cool that it's now a National Historic Landmark. And also something I forgot to talk about is 3 years after Nannie passed, so in 1964, Trades Hall, or the school that she opened, was renamed the Nannie Helen Burroughs School in honor of her. And another thing that she left a legacy by is she founded the largest Black women's organization in the U.S., which was the Women's Auxiliary of the National Baptist Convention. And obviously the biggest is founding a school for African American girls and women. I think Nannie Burroughs is not as recognized as she should be. I had never heard of her, and I'm very surprised because she opened her own school not only with her own funding, but she did it through only funding of African Americans, which was probably definitely very hard in that time. And she also helped African American women to get an education, which in that time, women in general didn't really get too much of an education. So African American women getting an education is very important. And she should also be recognized for helping found the Women's Auxiliary of the National Baptist Convention. And How the Sisters Are Hindered from Helping speech, that's a speech that she gave, and it basically talked about injustices women faced within the Black Baptist Church. And it helped build her national reputation and create momentum for a greater role for women in the church. So, how can I use this in my classroom? I think I can use this in my classroom by teaching my students to chase their dreams, which is exactly what Nannie Burroughs did, and to fight for what you believe in. If there was something that was going on that Nannie Burroughs didn't think was right, she would fight for it and fight for what was right. I also think I can just teach my students about Nannie Burroughs and teaching my students about the first vocational school for African American women and girls, because that is very important, and it obviously changed our history because African American women and girls didn't get too many opportunities to get an education, so I think it's very important that we learn about when they did. I would also teach my students that race and gender does not define a person. That's another big thing that Nannie Burroughs preached. And I would show them more than just a textbook, and teaching them life skills. So I would obviously teach what I'm supposed to teach, but I would want to teach further than the textbook and give my students skills that they can use in the future. There's, very few things I probably remember from elementary school, but of the things I do remember are stuff I still use today and stuff I use in the real world. So I think teaching them life skills is very important that way. And that was my presentation. Here are my resources and citations. And yeah, thank you.